Welcome back to another Boilers Extra. I'm Nathan Baird from the Indy Star.
Sam King from the Journal and Courier.
We are matching up today, black polos for some reason. Is this the start? This is for the start of Big Ten play. We felt like it was time to go. It's the death of the preseason and we're doing like a funeral for the preseason and ushering in the start of Big Ten play.
I thought it was a boiler blackout or something like that. So
maybe. Yeah. We are not team branded here, but we are here to talk Purdue football. We're going to be joined in a few minutes by Gary Danielson, obviously former Boiler quarterback and longtime broadcaster who's making his final tour of the Big Ten this year as he's retiring this year after 36 years. And we'll be on the broadcast with Brad Nessler for Saturday's game at Ross-Ade Stadium against USC. Before we get to him, I wanted to get into a question that one of our listeners sent us. This is from Northern Boiler, a longtime listener. What would you consider a successful performance against USC, regardless of a win or a loss, unless winning is the bar? And I thought that was an interesting way to kind of frame a quick discussion around what we know about this Purdue football team and what we don't as Big Ten play begins. But let's just start there. Like, do you go into Saturday thinking that this team is not at a place yet where you have to say win or lose is the only way to judge this team? Or is, hey, it's the Big Ten. That's the standard. Do you beat or lose? Do you win or lose against your competition?
Yeah. It is an interesting way to phrase that because Barry Odom said this 2 weeks ago after the Ball State game. You're gauged by your wins and losses. That's the stat. But I know that he's alluded to several times, this team is not last year's team. And I even wrote, we got to stop comparing this team to last year's team because they're just night and day difference. But when you look at where Purdue was and where it wants to go, which is back into competitive within the Big Ten Conference, I do think that at some point you have to take a step. And while winning would certainly get you there, that would be huge for this program moving forward. I think to show some fights and prove that you can compete against a team that clearly has a high octane offense in USC, if you can keep pace or, slow that team down a little bit, that is a step in the right direction for Purdue right now. I don't think necessarily this season we can gauge complete success on wins and losses. I think you have to take into account that, hey, this is the worst power conference football program in the country last year, and it wasn't really that close. So to get to that next level, first you've got to, kind of have the in-between the bumper, and I think that's where Purdue is, trying to just find a way to maintain competitiveness in some of these games where, you're going to be the underdog by 3 or 4 touchdowns.
So here's the more nuanced answer that I came up with to this question, which is I think the only measure of success on Saturday is if one Big Ten team beats another Big Ten team. This is your weight class, more or less. I know USC historically has been a powerhouse program at times. It may be climbing back there. There's some metrics out there that really like what USC has done through 2 games. There's power rankings out there that have them as like a top 10 team in the country. However, I think that's the only measure of success. I think a loss on Saturday, though, is not necessarily a failure. I don't think it's a binary way. I don't think you look at this team in a binary way quite yet. And I think you alluded to why. And Barry Odom has, on a number of occasions, like you said, he's trying to put as much distance as he can with words, whether it's the words he uses or the words that we try to use between this year and last year. But the best way to do that is to go out and separate with your performance on the field. I would argue that they have started to do that already, even through 2 games against Ball State and Southern Illinois. The way they came out really strong from the start against Ball State, and the way that this team, I don't think it's a good thing that this team got down the way it did against Southern Illinois. I thought it showed some vulnerabilities in this defense that I bet Lincoln Riley is going to exploit maybe in a significant way on Saturday. It's still the gap between Southern Illinois and USC, I think, is significant. So I don't think that's a positive. However, I think a year ago, same circumstances, that version of Purdue's football program would have really played with its food maybe all day and maybe won that game at the end, but it would not have been in the same fashion it did win it on Saturday, which was, yes, stub your toe at the beginning, respond in both possessions on offense, even though you got some help with some timely penalties, but finish off touchdown drives, and then you control the rest of the game. Like those sorts of things are at least at least baby steps forward for the program. So I don't look at Saturday. We'll give our predictions at the end of this podcast. I don't think either of us are expecting this to be a nail biter, but I do think that the next step that Purdue has to take as a program, yes, all the names are different and the players' names are different. And I think Barry Odom understands this. It's just the way coaches kind of have to talk about things. We get a freedom to talk about things in a way that they can't. It's a different perspective, and I respect that. But the attachment is still there. Like we're talking to people in this program over the summer, talking to players, I think they still feel that 1-11 attachment, even if they weren't here. And the last time Purdue was on the field against the better teams in college football, or even just the top half of the Big Ten, it often looked like it didn't belong. So, I mean, certainly the last time we saw it against Indiana. So that is a step that the program has to take. I don't know that it has to take it on Saturday. It has to take it this season at some point.
Yeah, and this is the first challenge because while there is a game coming up later this season against Northwestern and Rutgers, there's no easing into the schedule now. Like you've got your 2 games out of the way that people expected you to do exactly what you did. Now you face back-to-back weeks, USC and Notre Dame. And if you're not ready to play or, ready to elevate your performance, not saying it's going to be 66-7 like Purdue and Notre Dame last year, but you're going to be on the wrong side, of a butt whooping. And you just wonder how long you can keep fans engaged if that kind of continues to happen. Last year, it got out of hand quick. I don't think that's going to be the case with this team, but I think you have a couple losses like that in a row, and fans will kind of start to, maybe not be as invested in Purdue football this season.
Yeah, I don't know that, like, I've talked many times now about like kind of the stages of this season. First stage is over. You went your 2-0. That was as good as you could be after 2 games, obviously. And then this next thing is a stage, and like USC is not ranked, but like I said, there's a lot of metrics out there. I think SP Plus, ESPN's SP Plus, the Bill Connolly metric had them as like 16th in the country. My friend Tyler Shoemaker does what he calls a T-shoe index. He uses mostly for like figuring out gambling things, but that one had USC as number 10 after 2 games, and that's just based on like drive performance, not a resume ranking. Like this is a high-powered team, and I think that fans are probably realistic about that. Like they'll be able to see when this game unfolds, was this just a talent disparity game? But I think it's a gap that has to close just in terms of last year there was a hopelessness about some of those games. And I think that just taking some of the hopelessness out of it, like, hey, like you took your shot, that team was just really talented and it beat you. Maybe you played with them for the first half. I don't think that's not something that you can rest on as a program, but in an assessment as you're going along, I get where I think that has some value right now as we're trying to scrutinize this in real time. As we're scrutinizing this in real time, Sam, what's the thing after 2 weeks when you look at this team where you say, I don't know if I believe this yet. I need to see Purdue against Big Ten competition before I will say this.
Well, it's interesting because I probably had a different take 2 weeks ago when I thought, this secondary has a bunch of experienced players who've played a lot of college football, and that was going to be something Purdue could hang its hat on was these guys were kind of probably Big Ten ready. And now, especially seeing some of the big chunks of yardage through the air that Southern Illinois got on its first 2 drives, I got to see the secondary against 2 of the elite receivers in the Big Ten probably to see, is the secondary ready? The safeties has been pretty good. The corners have been, probably hit and miss at times. But now you've got to step it up because there is no shortage of NFL caliber receivers in this conference. So you're going to see them every single week.
Agreed. And mine is kind of the flip side of that. It's not necessarily the defense shutting out Ball State didn't surprise me like that. I think Ball State is pretty bad. I think Southern Illinois is better than Ball State. It certainly has a better quarterback. than Ball State did. And we've known all along that the Big Ten teams are going to be a bigger challenge. I don't yet believe that this offense is going to put up a lot of points against good teams this year. And they haven't really put up a lot of points relatively against the competition yet. 65 points in 2 games against lower level competition, I think is fine. It's not bad. We've seen worse over at times at some other low points in Purdue history. But I still want to see, they are very excited about how they ran the ball against Ball State and in some way, against Southern Illinois. And in some ways, I understand that. In other ways, they averaged 3.9 yards per carry against an FCS team. And now some of that is you have to factor in there were a couple of 1-yard touchdown runs, which brings down the average, but not that much. And Ryan Brown wasn't sacked, so it's not like that's a sack-adjusted stat. I'm not that impressed by that. I think this offensive line has to keep getting a lot better, and it's going to have to get better now kind of on the fly against Big Ten caliber teams. I also think that, Ryan Brown hasn't faced a pass rush that these Big Ten teams are going to throw at them, has not faced the consistency of Big Ten secondary. There's going to be some bigger challenges on him. But I also think that he has shown some poise and some confidence, especially the way that these games have started. So I think this coaching staff is helping him in a way that the coaching staff was not helping its quarterbacks last year, which is helping him. But I do think that we're going to learn a lot more about this offense probably on Saturday, because its successes have been somewhat loud, but they've been early for the most part, and they've been inconsistent. And being able to 3 yards in a cloud of dust against Southern Illinois doesn't impress me for your prospects in the Big Ten, even if Southern Illinois turns out to be an FCS playoff team, because FCS playoff teams would still not be among the top 2/3 or 3/4 teams in the Big Ten at any given year.
Yeah. So Missouri State, which is in the same conference as Southern Illinois, opened the season playing at USC, and USC put 73 points on that team. Missouri State turns around last week and wins at Marshall, which is pretty impressive. Yep. So, that's kind of what you think of when a Big Ten team plays an FCS team, kind of how it should go. And, whether or not Southern Illinois is good, I think Southern Illinois probably is, one of the better FCS teams in the country. But if you're a Big Ten team, that shouldn't faze you. You should, from the get-go, kind of own and dominate that game. To Purdue's credit, it adjusted on the fly and ultimately did. But, the lopsided scores like the 73-13 that we saw with USC a couple weeks ago, or even what USC did last week against Georgia Southern, that's kind of more of the traditional what you think when a Big Ten team faces these inferior teams early in the season.
Let's not be completely pessimistic. Let's make sure we do the other side too. Is there anything you've seen in the first 2 games that you're already ready to say, this is going to be there in week 12? I believe my eyes. This is going to stick around.
I think that the interior defensive line has a chance to be really good at stopping the run. Now, where that gets tricky is mobile quarterbacks, and we saw it with Ball State a little bit. When you get quarterbacks that are elusive and start running around, you can get some big chunk plays. But I think Jamarian Harkless and TJ Lindsey and then D'Amico Kennedy and the guys that they're there in the middle have a chance to be really good against the run this season.
I think that's a good one. I think they're also going to get some pass rush out of that group. Mm-hmm. Harkless and Kennedy are both bigger guys, but you still see the penetration that they can get. And obviously Lindsey as that 3-tech that's why he's there. They want him to get in the backfield. I think those guys can be part of the pass rush answer too. I'd like to see a little bit more off the edge, but I think those guys can be, we obviously saw what CJ Nolan did in the last game, getting a couple late to choke off that last drive that SIU was really able to make. I'll go other side of the ball. I think Armand Branch is legitimately a playmaker. We saw the emergence of him in camp. We were hearing the emergence of him over the summer. Then we saw some emergence from him in camp. I thought, as much as I had been at times pessimistic about where the receiving corps was coming out of camp, he wasn't one that I really had concerns about. I thought he was a pretty consistent performer in camp as far as ball security, making plays downfield, making plays against DBs. And you've seen that in the first 2 games. Now, it hasn't been huge gains. It's not like if he's not winning you a fantasy week or whatever, but he's been able to get in the end zone. He's been a big part of what they've attacked from the very beginning. He's been a big part of the offense for a reason on those opening drives. And teams, I think, have adjusted to account for him more. They're going to need other guys to step up consistently in the pass game. But I think he's a guy. I mean, I don't know if he's one of the best receivers in the Big Ten, but I think he is separating himself as a playmaker that Purdue can rely on game to game.
Yeah, he's definitely an elite athlete. I mean, I wrote about him last week. I talked to his high school coach who played for Missouri right before Barry Odom got there as a student athlete and then played in the NFL. And he said, he's kind of getting to that point now where Armand Branch has matured. He's in his third year of college, and now you're kind of seeing a third-year guy versus the last couple of years you had this freak athlete who maybe just was behind in some things because you're adjusting to a level where everybody is on scholarship. Everybody's a really talented player, a really kind of a freak athlete, and now Armand Branch has developed into the point where a guy who used to think he was a basketball player first, a track and field athlete second, and then as a junior in high school decided he was also going to play football. He's now fully bought in as like, okay, I'm a football player and I can, if things go right, maybe make something of myself in this sport.
That maturity thing keeps coming up in conversations I'm having about other players. I'm working on a piece for IndyStar.com, JCOnline.com about Chops Harkless that'll hopefully run, I think, next Monday. And a big part of it is kind of an epiphany that he's had in terms of taking some important things more seriously and being more mature. That was a word that came up with multiple people I talked to. I think you would probably look, I imagine Ryan Brown thinks everything he's been through in the last year, he's probably a more mature player, even the veteran guys, but especially the guys who you see right now being important guys who were already here. They've all talked about, because none of these guys, with the exception of maybe Devin Mockabee, were considered upper tier Big Ten players at their position, right? They all still had to emerge in some way. And I think a lot of them are pointing to just that more, being older and having a more mature perspective on things. And now that's starting to show up on the field. You mentioned USC's receivers, and I forgot to point out by name, but it's Mekhi Lemon. He's going to be wearing number 6 on Saturday. Jacoby Lane, he's going to be wearing number 8 on Saturday. This is guys that Mike Shearer, the defensive coordinator, was talking about on Saturday being exceptional players. And they come up again in our conversation with Gary Danielson, who did not get the memo about wearing a black polo today, but we allowed him on the podcast anyway. We gratefully took a few minutes, and he's going to get into how he sees just what he's seen from Purdue early on and how he thinks this matchup is going to go. We are joined on Boilers Extra today by Gary Danielson from CBS Sports and obviously from Purdue University back in the day. Gary is back in West Lafayette. This is his final season, retiring after the season, but he's going to be calling or being the analyst again on Saturday's game against USC. Gary, how are you doing? How does it feel to be back in West Lafayette?
Well, I'm a little apprehensive considering the last couple trips, but no, I have great memories. It's it's where I acquired the most valuable thing in my life, my family, and great friends. The King family treated me great when Christy and I were first married and had not 2 nickels to rub together. So we got off without their help. We wouldn't be here. So a lot of great people that I met and helped me along the way. It's always good to come back.
Well, let's get into the X and O's with this one because I know you've been studying up, obviously, for Saturday's game. You saw
Sure.
Purdue, as you kind of alluded to already, you saw Purdue a couple of times last season. Just from 2 games now that you've seen, anything that jumps out to you as the biggest differences you see, either in terms of execution or just, I guess, a general vibe?
They do seem to have overall talent seems a notch higher to me than it was a year ago. They are. I felt they were doing a lot of good things a year ago, but coming into this game, they had just won the game before, a year ago before the Notre Dame game. So you didn't really know what to expect, but it felt defensively. I think the overall impression I got is they just did not have enough talent to play the style of defense they were playing, and that put a lot of players that were medium to average good players, maybe for Big Ten players, that if they were surrounded maybe with a little more talent around them or maybe with a little different scheme, they would be able to show more. But the lack of, really strong talent at a lot of key positions, And the style that they were playing defensively really put them in some tough situations. But then again, I saw them playing against two pretty strong football teams. Notre Dame and Penn State were two of the best. That couple games they played a little better. Illinois game to what I remember, but overall, changes need to be made. And I've known Barry for a long time. They do seem to have a little bit more talent, and they seem to be playing together a little bit more.
What is your evaluation of Ryan Brown thus far? I don't know how much. I don't think he wasn't really playing in either of the games you saw in person last year.
No.
But what do you think so far, and just how successful do you think he can be once this transitions to Big Ten competition?
Well, he's going to need help. I think, for Ryan to do the things he needs to do, he needs a good running attack. I think that if this Purdue team tries to be the 2000 Drew Brees team, that's not going to work. They've got some decent athletes at a wide receiver, and Ryan is a good thrower of the ball, but he plays his best football when it's meshed with a strong running attack. Now, that's probably for most of us, okay? There's very few Drew Breeses or Mark Hermans that run through that you can, throw 70% of the time. And this team, I think, needs to be very balanced for Ryan to do his job. But then when that happens, he is a very strong threat and gives defenses a lot of problems because he is a willing runner and pretty athletic when he does it. And obviously, he has the tools that when things are fit together, he can attack pretty well. I mean, he's an interesting prospect, and I bet he will improve the next 2 years really strongly.
Hey, Gary, you mentioned the offense, but I want to go to the defense because I think because the defense was so porous at times last year, it didn't really allow the offense to do what it was maybe designed to do.
Correct.
And you're playing from behind a lot. But how have you seen kind of the jump on that side of the ball where this defense has been the thing that's anchored this team early on the season?
So, one of the things that you always have to watch out for is just, I'm not saying anything everybody doesn't know. I don't have any new ideas personally, but you can get mesmerized by how things go against inferior talent. From the best teams like Alabama, who looks great against when they have all the talent, but when they play a team that's equal, it doesn't show up as well. I do like the system. I do think Barry has had a system that works for him. I do believe he gives more of his defensive players a chance to work as a unit, where I felt last year's team were requiring more of the players to win one-on-one battles. It feels more like this defense is working as an 11-on-1, that they're rallying to the ball better. They seem to adjust against formations better than last year's team. So all in all, I see more of a style that's more in line with the way an Iowa plays or Wisconsin played in the past or Illinois now is playing, where they don't have as much man-to-man coverage. They rely a little bit more on changing the defenses. They've used the portal strongly. They do have good Big Ten football players. I still think what Purdue lacks is, and what I think is college football is all about, is you get, because of the pro game in football, you don't get to go play pro football until you're in college for 3 years. You have players on the field that are matchup nightmares for regular college football teams. I still don't think Purdue has 2 or 3 of those guys that on the field where, Lincoln Riley's going, all right, how do we block this guy? How do we stop this guy? There seems to be good talent, but no talent that jumps off the table as NFL-ready talent right now.
Kind of a corollary to that, though, is just like, what have you seen from USC? Same thing applies. Like, they haven't really played high-level talent. They've scored 132 points in 2 games.
Yep.
I don't probably expect them to replicate that clip throughout the Big Ten, but do you expect to see them being able to keep scoring in bunches in conference play?
Probably not at that level, but they were pretty good on offense last year. It's funny, when I was doing the games last year, I kept talking about how Lincoln seemed to be trying to feed the ball to too many players. And it was almost if he had made a lot of promises to a lot of different players that he was trying to keep. And as a quarterback, trying to develop chemistry with 4 or 5 receivers 2 running backs. They used them, the tight ends. I just didn't know how they did that. They have pared down this year. They're going Lane and Lemon all the way as their 2 outside receivers. Those are really 2 tough matchups for anybody in college ball. They are really high-level players. There's Mayava's a much better player than he was a year ago, and I think actually superior to Miller Moss at that position. Those are the 2 guys that really stand out, and the way Mayava is playing this year compared to a year ago, that are difference makers. Defensively, their defensive line and their edge rushers are superior to where they were young last year at that spots. I think they're better in that particular reason. And, USC always has the defensive backs. I don't see on their defense in particular, except for Gentry, there's the player they lost a year ago, as a really NFL-ready player instantly, where the NFL scouts are drooling. Their main talent to me is on offense.
Gary, last week, Purdue, probably taken back to your college days, ran the ball 50-something times, and just tried to impose its will 3 and 4 yards at a time. I don't think that, Purdue clearly would like bigger chunk plays, but is that maybe a difference where there's maybe a more slow, methodical approach, taking what the defense gives you and trying to shorten a game that way, maybe against a talent like USC?
They're going to try to do that, but you're right. That's good until it isn't good. If the other team is scoring touchdowns, the way Southern Illinois got off the mark last week, the first 2 drives, I'm going, oh my gosh, players open all over the field. But, the Boilers answered, and that was the key. Then they started running and making it easier. If they can do that, if they can play that Iowa, Wisconsin, old Michigan State type of football, I think that'll work for them. I don't know, if that's possible in the modern college football game, that what style they used a week ago is going to be able to hold up week in and week out in the league. I think they're going to need more balance. I think the goal eventually for this Purdue team is if they could look more like the way Minnesota did last year with Max Brosemer, or the way Indiana did, where they were more balanced football team. If they can get there, then I think you'll see the growth that Coach Odom wants going for this year and for next year as he grows this program back to the way he envisions it, and everybody hopes it does.
Gary, any individual defensive players for Purdue that jumped out to you when you were watching those 2 games?
I took the 2 inside linebackers are Purdue-ish. You know what I mean? I played with those types of guys. You'd always find them. Correa and Powell are both, I think, impact football, Big Ten football players. I think they do the job. We've seen Nunnally before when he played against Ohio State. He is a significant football player. They're not bad at the corners, but any corner in college football is susceptible to a passing game if the overall rush isn't there. The problem they had a year ago, and I early in this football game, with the shifts and the motions and the way people play modern college football, you got to be ready to adjust, or you're going to get guys popping wide open. And that's from the best teams on. I saw a year ago when we did Penn State at USC, and Andy Kolonicki from Penn State had Tyler Warren catching, I think, 17 passes in that game. And most of them, they were fooled by the shifts, the motions, the unbalanced line. And that's usually what, Barry kind of stacks his defensive history, the way he's coached defense, that his team is ready to, at least at the snap, be ready to play football. I think that's the key to the game in modern college football, with the variations of formations, spreads of wide. I know it's been a long, long time ago, but this was something that was really never done for years and years and years in college football. And now it's really morphed. When a team, and that's why teams, by the way, are huddling more. The use of formations, overloads, extra offensive linemen, extra tight ends, splits that can be our wide receivers at 2 to 3 yards all the way to the sideline. It really stresses your defense, and most defenses at the snap are not ready to compete. And I think that's the key to the football game for Purdue. If they can be ready at the snap and not just be turning players loose, they can make this a football game.
obviously Saturday's game, I think every game this season is going to be judged through the lens of where's this team going? Where's the program going? How close are they to being back to a better level? And you've been around. I mean, you played here.
Yeah, right.
You've been here. I was talking to you in Las Vegas. You mentioned like multiple games involving Purdue that were among like your favorite games.
Historical.
Really, yeah, not because they were Purdue games, but just because great things happened
Absolutely.
in those games. Just can you kind of articulate what it would mean to this fan base, to the city of West Lafayette, to get this program back to a place where it doesn't necessarily have to be winning the Big Ten every year, obviously,
right?
But to get away from kind of what the last couple of years were and back to a place that's competitive again. And maybe why is it important for the Big Ten for that to happen?
I don't have any doubt that Purdue, the commitment from the university all the way down, the amount of money they're willing to put into it, the facilities, the fan base, the students that get engaged in the program. I don't have any doubt that this is a program that can compete in the Big Ten. And I think the best thing that's ever happened to these, let's call them other Big Ten teams, from the Wisconsins, the Minnesotas, to, Indiana's, to Purdue's, to Michigan State, is the playoffs. That you don't have to finish first or second in this league now to have a winning season. And I think there's no doubt that this program, I think Barry has sensed it and understands it. And I think once he's got here and actually witnessed it in person, he's more convinced than ever that this is a program that he can turn around and compete in the Big Ten. And you're right. The attractiveness of Purdue and their fan base is they're realistic, okay? That they know that they can win, and when they build the right type of team, they can compete with the best of the teams. But they know that that's not possible to do every year. There are a lot of programs that if you go 3 games without playing national championship caliber football, the fan base is unhappy. I think the fan base of Purdue is realistic. I think the Iowa fan base is that way. I think Wisconsin's that way. And that's the key to the new kind of the way the college football has grown, and I think in the right direction, in my opinion, that there's realistic opportunities for more than just the top 8 teams to be involved in college football the whole year.
Well, thanks a lot, Gary. Really appreciate your time. Hope you enjoy your time in West Lafayette this weekend, and hopefully we get to see you again down the line. Maybe you'll be back as just a fan and alum someday. Always
a fan. Love the basketball. Always love coming back here. All my buddies that I played with all have contacted me, and hoping it turns out a little better for the Boilers. It's not about me, but for the Boilers. But we want to showcase Purdue, that what a great place it is. People who visit here know what a special place it is to come to West Lafayette, and it's always good to come back.
Awesome. Thank you, Gary. We appreciate it.
All right. Thank you.
We really appreciate Gary joining us today. He flew in early, I think, to make sure that he could help us with our schedule to get this podcast up in by Thursday afternoon. So we really appreciate that. And a guy who I've talked to a bunch over the years. I didn't go into much about his history and his retirement and stuff in this pod. We wanted to just focus on the game. But if people can go to indystar.com and jconline.com, I did sort of a piece with him from when we talked in Las Vegas at Big Ten Media Days, where he reminisced a little bit more and talked about some of his favorite games. Sam, as we look at Saturday, is there one factor that you think determines the outcome of this more than any other?
I think that Gary kind of touched on it. As when you look at these teams, USC has a couple guys that when you watch film, you're like, holy smokes, how do we stop that guy? What do we have to adjust that we do to make sure that guy doesn't beat us? And Purdue right now is probably lacking that kind of a playmaker on its offense, where teams have to adjust to shut down an individual player or a position group. And that may be the difference. Is it's crazy because a few weeks ago I said that this could be a 3-0 start for Purdue. It was a bold take. You're supposed to kind of be outlandish a little bit. But I was looking at USC and I was kind of like, this team has kind of underperformed here in recent years compared to where people thought it was. And then I saw USC play the last 2 weeks and I'm like, yeah, Purdue might be in trouble here.
Yeah, honestly, like when I looked at this schedule before the season, and if you were trying to squint and see how does Purdue make a bowl game this season? You thought, okay, they start 2-0, and then a USC team that had some trouble going on the road last year, frankly. They went and lost to a not very good Maryland team. And Lincoln Riley, that's been a big conversation on that beat this week, actually, has been the adjustments that they've made since last season about how they handle going east and how they handle their whole practice week to kind of get ready and be in the right kind of rhythm, I think, for these sorts of games. They've changed what kind of plane they fly on to give the big guys more space to spread out. Like they've put some thought into how they can come to Roll State Stadium and put up some points on Saturday. And I think I feel kind of both ways what you're saying. It's the playmakers that I think USC demonstrably has. I mean, I was looking at there was an ESPN list where they had several people kind of giving their top 5 NFL prospects at various positions. Both of these guys were mentioned among the top 5 wide receiver prospects for this next draft. And at the same time, and not only do I not know if Purdue has the defensive players who can stop them enough, I don't know that Purdue has its own like game breakers on offense yet that it will be able to just keep up from a points perspective. I think even if Purdue's defense plays relatively well on Saturday, USC is going to score points. I don't know if that's true of Purdue. I don't know if right now they're at a place where they're going to score points regardless. So as you broke this down, Sam, what was your prediction for Saturday?
So I kind of went, I fluctuated back and forth, and I think the line is somewhere around 3 touchdowns. But I picked USC 42, Purdue 24, and I'm probably being generous with the 24, but I'd see maybe it's a situation where late Purdue's able to put some points on the board where the game's out of hand, and gets to where it looks respectable maybe a little bit. But you're right. I don't think that Purdue's going to be able to limit what these guys can do because I just think there's too many weapons for USC.
Yeah, that line opened around, depending where you're looking, like right around 20 and a half points. It is, I think, more or less hovered in that range this week. You and I are in the same ballpark. I just went the other side of it, whereas you're kind of thinking backdoor cover. I'm thinking a more comfortable win for USC. I went 41-17. So essentially just thinking Purdue will just score 1 less touchdown. It just comes down to, I don't think the offense has like consistently performed well against lower level competition through 2 weeks, and to expect them to just make that jump in 1 week against USC, I think is asking a lot. I think what you hope for if you're a Purdue fan, I mean, obviously you hope for a win. If a win can't happen, what do you start to see this week that tells you that can happen more consistently next week at Notre Dame, 2 weeks or 3 weeks, I guess it would be from now against Illinois? Like when do you start to see it click in against the better teams? Like this is Barry Odom keeps talking about the process, and what happens Saturday should still just be part of a process that gets you to where you're playing better by that Illinois game, because I think that Illinois game is a big one. All of these have kind of a historical tie, and after what happened last year against Notre Dame, they obviously want to go up to South Bend and put a better show on than they were able to do at home last year. But Illinois is a rivalry that Purdue has owned this rivalry. Purdue has been in control of this rivalry for the better part of the last 20 years. And the Illinois had some pretty bad teams in there, but kind of so did Purdue sometimes, and they still were able to win in this series. So now that Illinois is making its peak and like looking like it might be able to get away, can Purdue do something to take them out or at least hang close in that game? Because then that leads right into that other stretch of the year, the Minnesota, Northwestern, Rutgers, where now you really are in your true weight class, and can you make some hay there at that point of the season? But I look at Saturday as what can they take forward from those lower level? What can they replicate that was good from the past 2 weeks? And then at the same time, they're going to have to play an even cleaner game, an even more mistake-free game. You really can't afford to you got to stay away from turnovers, obviously, in a week like this. You're probably going to have to create some takeaways, something they haven't done yet. Yeah,
and Purdue's been pretty disciplined, but the 2 unsportsmanlike penalties late against Southern Illinois allowed the Salukis to kick it was a 53-yard field goal because C.J. Nunley shut that drive down kind of single-handedly. But you can't do that and compete in this league. But yeah, you're right. Purdue has to find a way at some point to be in consideration in the middle of that Big Ten pack. The teams that Gary Danielson alluded to, the Wisconsins and the Minnesotas and the teams that are, probably not the Oregon, Penn State, Ohio State, and Michigan that, annually you expect to be in the conversation for a playoff berth. We've now seen Indiana go to the playoffs last season. Illinois is one of the teams that people are talking about could do it this season. Those teams are not out of Purdue's league in terms of, revenue and things like that. You would think that Purdue could position itself there, not this season maybe, but over time where, you're in that kind of a conversation and you get the right schedule or you knock off somebody you're not supposed to, and you do something that's, probably a lot of people didn't think was possible, especially not last year, but maybe right now.
I think USC might be pretty good. I think we'll find out on Saturday. I think USC is one of those programs that their fan base is probably right now saying, why aren't you mentioning us with all those like playoff teams? Because it wasn't that long ago that USC was the best program in college football, or one of the 2 or 3. And I think they think that with Lincoln Riley, they're supposed to be there again. And I'm not saying they're going to get there this year, but I will say just because there's other Big Ten teams that are ranked right now and they're not, don't be surprised if it looks like a playoff team is in Ross-Ade Stadium on Saturday. I think they, at least offensively, I think they might have that kind of upside. But we will find out, and we will be back with you on Boilers Extra when that game concludes. Until then, I'm Nathan Baird. He's Sam King. Thanks for joining us.